I found that really quite interesting about the fact that lots of us now are nihilists. You know, don't have religion. We're not religious, even though we might have religious thinking. We're not religious. We don't have that meaning. We don't have, you know, we're not married or have family. Lots of people staying single longer, so they don't have that. People don't have job security anymore. There's no such thing as having a job for life. Everything that people have known in the past, which has given them a sense of stability, has been taken away. And now, obviously, we're going through this coronavirus. It's going to cause massive... He was saying it's going to cause, like, massive depression, and it obviously already is. But he thinks it's also linked to a loss of meanings and values that people aren't looking at them, people aren't assessing them, and people aren't scrutinising them. And that the fact that a lot of these are upside down, they're unhealthy, and that kind of, to bring balance back, is a good thing to kind of look at those again. And I was thinking, actually, I think that's quite good, and I need to do that myself, because when I'm thinking about what is my purpose and what are my values, I think a lot of those are not healthy or helpful, or, I mean, I think purpose is just, I don't know what my purpose is. That's the thing. I feel lost and I feel confused, and I think that goes for a lot of people. So I think that's really important to maybe not have an answer straight away, but go, I don't know, what is it, and can I sort of go through a process to help discover it? But I shouldn't push myself to, like, come up with an answer, but just knowing that I don't know.
Well, you see, now we are right now in the last a little bit more than 10 minutes. You provided a lot of info that is good, and is also super intriguing and super important. And this is only 10 minutes. So we talked about meanings, values, purposes, and then all of this applied with the current crisis and the hypothesis about what will happen next. And I completely agree, as I predicted, and I totally support those people that warn somehow about when this crisis will be over, like a new crisis will take place that will be probably unprecedented, and with that will be the crisis of, using this expression I don't like so much, the human consciousness, the way we process. We will process the former meanings we had in life that we used to take for granted dramatically, and also very superficially, by the way, and the new purposes in life that will be, that way of thinking will be permeated dramatically with a profound sense of insecurity and the fear of the unexpected that can hit any moment, which it did, and quite suddenly. And then also all the crises in consciousness about the way we will relate ourselves, and we are relating ourselves right now more or less intelligently, with the matter of meanings, pre-existing meanings, new meanings, and particularly the values. And this crisis is also unprecedented because it took place in a particular phase in the human experience, characterized by a reality where we never had so many values and so many meanings like we had in the past, and so much very confused, like all this process of identify like this and that, all this stuff, and then the political stuff, and then all the mess there, the confusion, the global instant communication, and the social media. We never had so many meanings, but what we have less and so we had we started this process, let's say the last decade. We definitely have less purposes. We think we have purposes, but we don't. We are captured. Most people are captured in a process of choosing sides, polarizing themselves, selecting this belief or that belief. Can be New Age, can be conspiracy theory, can be politics, can be left or right, can be what people usually do, and all the matter of superficiality. Choosing is not a psychological and collective condition where we develop rational, mature, intelligent purposes, because it's choosing in itself provides a profound distraction. Now, what will we choose when this crisis will be over? Going back to normal? Well, most people will go for it, but it won't be really as normal as it was before, which is good. It's very good. Because
I mean, how much will we actually change, though? I mean, I think initially there might be people talking about change, and there will be changes. There already has been, especially in our country, in terms of the politics and the Treasury announcing all these unprecedented measures of, help and support for employees, employers, the self-employed, small businesses, just handing out doling out money to support them through the economic crisis.
Well, but that is
that's a really good thing. But hoping that this will continue, because I think it's really nice that we now have a society which is, I don't want a socialist society, because I think that could be quite dangerous, but I think it's good to have a society which has some socialist values is healthy. I don't know how best to describe it rather than saying socialist, but in terms of, making sure that all of the citizens are supported with a safety net, so that nobody is really going to be just left to completely fall through the net, and there's always going to be help for people so they don't find themselves out of a job, out of a home, on the streets, not able to feed themselves or their family. That's good. To me, it shows that we've grown up as a society and we've become more civilized. That's really nice. So I'm hoping that that kind of thinking will continue in this country. Well, that's good.
I think that is good, but I will not call it socialism. I will call it social capital. I don't think that is going to be about modifying the Western society more in a socialist way, because fundamentally that money is mainly alone the government and the networks, particularly in Europe, among different governments, are providing to the people and the businesses in a way they are managing this that has to be soft and somehow convenient, but is still alone that will reflect positively itself in the next few months and this year for sure, but in a time range of 10 years will be felt financially by everybody that received the benefit from it. And that is the only way, because you cannot really provide them free money out of the blue like that, and that is what is going to happen. But the point I want to make is that no amount of money can really can eventually help with reducing a process of psychological deterioration, but is not a cure for it. And it is good to invest in social capital. I think we should not call it socialism or a socialism model. Not at all. Social capital. But what will be also good, if not even better, will be to investing in psychological capital, and that is not about money, or it will be about investing money in educational protocols aimed at reforming the educational system, and not just the school system, but the educational system involves the whole process of providing information. That also involves the media, including private media, not just the public government mass media, and many other things, the structure of the socialization, what we call civilization. And there is no talking about this so far. There is the talking about providing financial help. Now I know it's premature.
I'm optimistic that there will be some people calling for this, but at the moment, because we're in the midst of this health crisis, I'm hoping that it'll be something that emerges later on after we start having the lockdowns lifted, and people really, it's serious. People can see that the psychological damage to people is really serious, and something needs to be done about it, because I think it's going to be enormous.
Yeah,
because if it affected everybody, it's like everybody's either gone through it themselves, or had a family member go through it, or had a friend or relative or a next door neighbour, and some people very seriously, and people have lost people. My uncle died at the end of last week in New York City, and my auntie's critically ill in the ICU, and so it's going to, my poor cousin, he's probably going to lose both parents over this, and it's devastating. And that kind of psychological impact, it's going to be felt. People are going to be traumatized. So this needs to be so much investment in psychological capital, because the world is going to need it. It's going to be catastrophic if we don't do that.
I hope policymakers, more than politicians, because politicians come and go, policymakers will comprehend the absolute necessity to invest in this issue, and investing in reforming education, putting money there, developing programs and projects. That will be an absolute necessity. Of course, now it's premature, because I think that the next, the what we call the psychological pandemic situation will hit very visibly by the end of summer, and that will be nice if we start talking about that right now. But I understand from a government's viewpoint and the financial viewpoint and so on, the priority is given more to the financial support, because there are many people that just don't have any kind of income, and it's important to deal with the technicalities now.
Yeah.
But when that is done, the best we can, that what will follow, what must follow, will be dealing about what we can do with regenerating for the better, and providing better thinking skills, the fabric, the psychological fabric of society. That is an absolute necessity. I think it's very important we don't miss it, or we don't underestimate it, because if we do, that will be seriously catastrophic, and it will remain as something written in the books of history for a very long time. I think we should invest in it. I know it's difficult. Most people have a shell of ideas about what can be done, maybe positive psychology or whatever, or providing different meanings that won't work. Now, back to the matter of meanings. I think what is important, meanings and values, is important to understand the history and the evolution of the language related to it. So there is, etymologically speaking, I think it's very important. There's been an evolution from Latin, the Latin network, like including not just Latin but Italian, Spanish, and the French, and so on, to the English. And this there's been like a division of the original meaning of meanings, and that is relatively recent. That sort of took place in English, for example. The term meanings is relatively recent. It appeared in the year 1300, so 700 years ago, more or less.
Okay.
And the original term was meninge, that means the brain, like meningite, for instance. But the original significance of the origin of the term meanings meant act of remembering. That was the meaning.
Oh.
So
Okay,
in Latin instead, like it is right now, for example, in Italian, the English term meanings in Italian is significato, which means a significance, and comes from the senses. So if we are attentive about this, there's been a profound difference, conceptual difference between sensing, that is more about feeling, which means I don't have enough data about this and that, so I don't have to cling to the meaning, because I have a feeling, I have a sense, I'm sensing, and I don't have yet a clear perception about what this meaning is all about. I have to be careful. But then it transformed itself in English, probably because the purpose of English was meant to have a more simplified language to facilitate the trades and the market there. In English, it became an act of remembering. Now we have to be very careful about this, because in Latin, the original concept of meaning was sensing, or significance that has to do with symbols. Was not about knowledge, was about perceiving, sort of feeling, meaning not having enough information, and therefore being careful with the conclusion and the interpretation, and therefore the finalized meaning, or collectively accepted. But in English it became an act of remembering, which is based on knowledge, which means that sounds like this taken for granted. It's very different, and the purpose etymologically, the purpose comes from again Latin, and the meaning was to have a place. That was the original meaning, or a goal, what we will call it today, to have a goal. So
meaning was to have a goal.
No, a purpose.
Oh, a purpose.
A purpose, but how can we have a purpose if our meanings, better to say, the interpretation of our meanings is confused, misleading, or even messed up? Now, I don't mean to put down meanings. I don't think having meanings in life is a problem. I think it's a form of language, and is a form of mimetic thinking, which is what developed our civilization. Without meanings, we will not have human rights, for instance. We will not have the concept of democracy. We also will not have bad things like ideology, religious fanaticism, and all of that. But that is the side effect. As a matter of fact, we live a better life today than the life we had 1,000 years ago and 5,000 years ago. That happened because of meanings. So I don't mean to put down meanings completely, but the point is that why do we have good meanings, benevolent meanings, and malevolent, non-beneficial meanings? And the way I will approach this is that having meanings in life is not the problem. The problem is to be found in the way we interpret meanings. Like, for example, since you mentioned Elon Musk, About a month and a half ago or so, he tweeted something that generated a super big polemical situation because he tweeted a very short sentence, and the sentence was, "This pandemic panic is dumb." So, because of that, people interpret that, saying that he believed that the virus was not a big deal and so on. But that is not what that sentence means. So I'm quite shocked that most people interpret that way, because it's a simple sentence, plain English, and he never said the virus is dumb. He said the panicking is dumb, and it's true. Because do we know any form of panicking that is not that is beneficial for the people,
No.
for the collective? No, and that is what he meant. But then he had to apologize. He had to apologize because he had no time to explain. He's not a philosopher. He had no time and probably not even
also,
willingness.
He doesn't need to explain himself. He shouldn't need to explain himself.
I think it was a mistake to apologize, because if you've done nothing wrong, you don't. Why will you apologize really? And then this giving people what is giving people fuel for the interpretation they developed, and that's bad. And that is that was, I found that pretty shocking, but I'm familiar with that regardless. Shocking because the sentence was very clear and very, very simple in plain English, I repeat. And the sentence was, this pandemic panic is dumb. And it is true. Because I understand we are concerned, but that doesn't mean we have to panic. That causes more harm than good. Who can dispute that? But he never say the virus is dumb and freaking out because of the virus. So
obviously people are interpreting that he's not taking it seriously. He thinks that the lockdown's not. I don't know. They've obviously, as you say, if somebody hears something like that, which is counterintuitive, which doesn't fit the general narrative around the pandemic, people will just jump to conclusions without properly analysing exactly what he's saying, even though it's just one simple sentence. That's quite worrying, isn't it, really?
Well, he's known as a straw man. In that case, it was not usually a straw man fallacy is intentional. In that case, it was collective and likely not collectively intentionally performed. So strawman fallacy is fundamentally based on, usually, when it is intentional, deliberately twist the interpretation of something in order to provide the false narrative of whatever a person said to other people, and in order to modify their perception about that whatever that person said and that person itself. So, for example, if I say, to me, panicking is stupid, and I'm also willing to explain why I'm saying this, because it can be, it's not my opinion, can be proven in all sorts of ways. It is indisputable. Who will promote panicking, really?
But panicking makes you stupid because you're unable to think. If you're panicking, you can't think.
Of course. So you are entirely emotional. Your actions are informed primarily, if not entirely, by your limbic system. And now that we also have a digital life, and that is based on AI algorithms, if we panic, we are going to inform digital AI and the algorithms by using primarily or fundamentally or entirely our limbic system. And this is exactly what is happening right now with all the insanity that is exploding on particularly social media, and not just conspiracy theories, but just insanity. Now, that is certainly dumb and stupid and dangerous. But if a person that is listening to me, assuming the person is listening, interprets what I'm saying, and then is going to to tell that to another person and then engaging a Chinese whisper game, if the person is going to say, this person believes that the crisis going on is stupid, should not, is not a crisis, is not a problem. But I never say that. I say there's something completely different and based on logical analysis. So that is a straw man fallacy and is absolutely bad, particularly when it's done intentionally, for the deliberate intention to twist a person, to discredit or to put the person down or to shape the perception of that person or that people will develop. But sometimes it is done. It is done not on purpose, and the reason why is to be found in the lack of thinking skills most people have. So back to the point, it's not a problem to have meanings, but we have to be careful. We have meanings based on knowledge, and the problem there is that often we take that knowledge for granted. We don't evaluate the relationship we have with that knowledge and the premises that are behind. So to comprehend if they are valid, if there is some sense making, or they are just taken for granted and eventually invalid or even toxic. And we have meanings also as the original sense. The original meaning was to sense, to have feelings, but what we would call perception has many names. A sensation of something. We even say that I have a feeling about that something. I perceive something. I sense something. Well, there is nothing wrong with that too, because it's natural and it's how our brain works and how our behavioral psychology works. What is wrong is not to be careful and responsible enough to detect and to compute the interpretations we have of knowledge and then as a meaning. And the interpretation we have of perception of meanings. And of course, the process of clinging too easily to certain conclusions, assumptions, hypotheses, and interpretations. That is the problem. So I think it's good to have meanings because it's fundamentally a form of language. So we can more quickly and easily identify more or less what is going on. So the meaning of this person being in disagreement with me, that is a meaning. At least I know there is a disagreement, and then I can proceed carefully, not to achieve an agreement, but to understand why there is a disagreement. But that is based initially on meanings, and that's okay. So the purpose there is not to compete. The purpose is to really comprehend the best we can the way we are relating ourselves with the meanings there. Yeah, that is disagreement. That is the meaning. But how am I relating to that? So, for example, am I listening properly? Or am I filtering everything with my own beliefs and pre-existing interpretations? Or am I wanting to overimpose something? This is what is important. The information processing in which the interpretation is also developed. That has nothing to do with meanings. But if we cling to the meanings first, then we are going to fight. Or to just chatter.
So, yeah. I mean, in terms of like having a meaning in life, would you say that's different to a purpose in life, or would you say they're really meaning the same thing? If someone says, I've got meaning in my life, and another one says, I've got a purpose, this is the purpose to my life. Is that the same thing, or is there some subtle difference? Or
often it's the same, but I think that is a problem because we should differentiate. So what is the meaning of life really? that life can have a purpose, and it does have a purpose, and it should have a purpose. But what is the meaning really of life? We have to be very careful. I know it's just language, but it's not just a language. It depends.
Because I feel that meanings are more second-hand. So we're adopting those meanings from other people. They're not our own meanings. We might have like a meaning that is more important to us that we adopt as like that's the meaning, but it's not our own. It comes from somebody else. Whereas a purpose tends to be much more personal.
Could be personal, but fundamentally there are objective purposes in life that cannot be personalized much. Then, of course, we have our personal things and system of preferences. But I will propose let's stick to the objective purposes. And it's actually interesting how people have been struggling for thousands of years about finding the purpose in life, and then they came up with what? Interpretations that were usually religious, so maybe some achieving some heaven or reincarnation or cleaning the karma, depending of the cultural imprinting, of course. But all of it's fascinating how it's fascinating to comprehend how much people struggled with the concept of the purposes in life, the purpose of life. And developed something that is very far away from the actual objective purposes in life, and that caused more problems than good. Now, what's the purpose of life really? It's not really that complex. First of all, I think I will differentiate between biology and psychology. So, the biological purpose of life is not complex at all. We know that. It's easy. It's to reproduce the genes of a certain species, eventually with modifications, in order to allow the species to survive successfully. That usually doesn't happen, but for a long time it happens, and that is the biological purpose of life. That is clear, and therefore surviving, replicating, finding food, shelter, staying away from predators, or hunting, and so on. But the psychological purpose of life, that also has to do with the existential purpose of life, that is way more complex, but not too complex. I would say the psychological purpose of life is progress, not just the external progress, like technology, the society, the human rights, all of that too, that is important too. The medicine, the health care system, and so on. But inwardly, it's the progress of the way we think. But it doesn't appeal to most people. Better to cling to some second-hand, pre-packaged, pre-existing belief system or something. Or a group that is the same. Or a pre-existing meaning.
Yeah.
So the psychological purpose of life inwardly, not the human collective experience, is to refine the way we think. So to bring about clarity more and more and more and progress. Who can dispute that? Because if we don't have that...
Yeah. Because progress is an outcome though, isn't it? Progress is an end result. That kind of emerges from thinking.
Well, I would not call it an end. It's a constant process that probably will never end. Now, if we think ahead, and actually very ahead, let's say a few thousand years, if we will survive, obviously our psychology will gradually change and will be definitely more intertwined with the psychology of being partially cybernetic beings, and then also the psychology of being an interplanetary and interstellar, hopefully interstellar species that will dramatically change our psychology for the better, because if it's not for the better, there is no way we can achieve that, of course. It won't happen. It simply won't happen. And for the better involves developing the ability to keep ancient, obsolete mindsets and beliefs as a part of our history and culture, human culture, in the museums, the libraries of the future and so on. That is good. But without using them to progress, to proceed, to move further, because that will be a block that will make it structurally impossible to develop ourselves for the better gradually. Now, to put it in a very simple form, biologically, the purpose of life is called evolution, biologically. But evolution, in Darwinian terms, has nothing to do with becoming more intelligent, not necessarily. Has nothing to do with becoming stronger, not necessarily. The evolution, Darwinian evolution, is not about the stronger is the one who survives or the smartest is the one who survives, but it's the one that adapts the best, the one that will survive. So, also adapting in space, other planets, and so on. That is Darwinian. Psychologically, we talk a lot about this term, we are evolving, we are evolving, we are evolving. What we forget to identify is that we are not evolving necessarily for the better, because we have the same mind we had thousands of years ago. We are wild, we step out of the jungle yesterday. And we can see right now, with this crisis, how dramatically idiotic many people are. Waiting in line for hours in order to buy the toilet paper. Depriving old people of supplies. It's very, 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 very dramatic. How there are those they call them influencers that they managed to make a challenge viral that is about leaking public toilets, and some of them got the virus, got sick, and they call them influencers. They influence in what terms? Making people more dramatically stupid and dull and dangerous. So
dangerous, stupid. I mean, who would go around licking public toilets? These people.
Well, if they know they can have a larger following by doing that, because people will watch that, and numbers, many numbers on social media can be monetized, and so that means money.
This is going to extreme lengths for followers.
It's crazy.
It's just really crazy. This is actually frightening, because this is what will stall our progress.
There is this.
It's a disease. It's actually it's like COVID-19. It's a disease. Like people on life support who are doing stuff like that.
It's worse actually.
It's bad.
There is a younger guy on Instagram that is an influencer, and he actually got influenced by another girl who is also an influencer on social media with this challenge. So this guy made a video, and the video had over 1 million views of people that many of those people became prone to imitate the same behavior. And then this guy got sick and went to the hospital. A very young guy, by the way. And then he apologized. Of course, we always apologize when it's always too late, and therefore it's futile. Because apologizing doesn't provide any understanding of things. It's just an apology.
Yeah.
So, all this problem is massive. Now, all of this has nothing to do with any kind of psychological evolution for the better. So the biological evolution, the purpose of life, is about surviving. But the psychological evolution is not Darwinian. We are actually becoming, and we have to, we are becoming, and we are already, an anti-Darwinian species. If we want to survive, we have to become almost entirely anti-Darwinian if we care about surviving as a species, but also individually. And that involves developing a psychological evolution based on betterment, not on adaptation or imitation. Because most of the things we imitate psychologically in terms of behavioral psychology right now, and we always did, are things that are pre-existing. We adapt to psychological environments just because we think that this or that is convenient to us. And we go for it critically, without really thinking about the relationship we establish with any process of amalgamating ourselves with what people will call the common sense, that usually is perceived and taken for granted as something benevolent. But in critical thinking, the common sense is to be questioned constantly, because it's not usually something as benevolent and rational as it seems. It's quite the opposite, actually. It's often fragmented.
Yeah, the epistemic is acceptances.
Yeah.
That we just accept because it's seen as common sense. It's very. I think it's a lot of effort for people, though. People are, I think, overwhelmed with information, and it's hard for people to process information properly because they are just flooding themselves with so much information, because they're online all the time and watching TV and constantly consuming. And then how can our brain properly process all this information if we're consuming so much but we're not taking care over the information that we're consuming? So we need to be much more I think we just need to we need to be better judges identifying what's healthy and what's not, and actually cutting out a lot of rubbish that we're consuming that actually is not healthy.
But we don't do that. We assimilate further garbage. So a big mistake. I know that
this is being much more careful about the kind of media and the kind of information I consume. So obviously, from being very new age and from literally flooding my brain with too much rubbish, causing it to have like a sort of breakdown. This is what a lot of people were doing. You don't realise what you're doing is so harmful. So, and I think it's really interesting when you were saying to me, like, don't read or consume a lot of media, watch YouTube before you go to bed, that kind of thing, so that your brain isn't flooded with so much information that it can't process properly, and then it's trying to process it while I'm asleep, and because the mind isn't there, it's kind of coming up with nightmares and all sorts of things.
So we all know what happens, as an analogy, with what happens when we leave a computer on for days, which is a mistake I constantly perform, by the way. So if the computer is always on and connected wirelessly to the internet, the computer is not doing nothing, is assimilating constant information in terms of bytes coming from the wireless signal. And if we keep on going that way, and we never reset the computer or taking care of that, or running software that can eliminate the trash and so on, the computer gets slower and slower and slower and slower, and doesn't function up to the point where it doesn't function properly any longer. So it takes a lifetime just to open maybe a page, or doesn't load properly, all of the stuff. That is certainly a problem. Now, of course, a computer is not like a human brain and a human mind. It is getting there, but it's a good metaphor. It's not a good analogy, but it's a good metaphor because there are elements of truth there. So what that means? That means that if we don't take care about the information processing, and we assimilate a lot of rubbish, a lot of trash, and we don't identify that as trash, So we don't care about eliminating it. Then our mind, analogously, becomes more and more confused. We don't perceive it as like slowing down. We perceive that differently, as actually rushing, or eventually getting super confused and neurotic and probably panicking. And this is what we do. Now, I'm going to say something that I know is extremely controversial, but is not, and again, we have to stay away from meanings for a while and try not to interpret. Now, a big mistake is to cling to knowledge. Now, I know this is very controversial. It sounds sort of crazy, but it's not if we are attentive about all of this stuff. Knowledge is important. I don't dispute that. Particularly good knowledge is absolutely important, and bad knowledge is also important to help us identify that as bad knowledge, so we can discharge it. So knowledge is important, is essential, but to cling to knowledge in the first place, which is in critical thinking known as appeal to knowledge fallacy, is a serious mistake, because the process of clinging to knowledge is also based on choosing this, that data, that information. It is nowadays, particularly right now, this crisis is frantic because it also clings to the desire of wanting to know. And therefore, it clings to the illusion of feeling, having some psychological security. So maybe that can be compensated by and from some conspiracy mindset. Now I know what is going on. There are the elites, the this and that, the evil, the aliens, the reptilians, the Illuminati. Now I know. And what are you going to do with that knowledge? You're going to live in fear. Obviously, it's not going to make you feel better. Or the scientific knowledge that is important, of course. So we know the facts, the objective facts, the reality and stuff like that, that is good, but doesn't give us an understanding of
the whole reptilian thing is a belief system, isn't it? It's information, it's not really knowledge. I wouldn't class that as knowledge.
What? Sorry,
the reptilians you just mentioned.
Well,
I mean, what would you class? I would class some information about the Illuminati as knowledge, but not all. Like conspiracy theories, I don't consider to be knowledge. I consider those to be belief systems.
Well, what I mean by knowledge is the database we allow we download into our brain. That is knowledge. It doesn't matter if it is absolutely absurd or is good knowledge, like verifiable knowledge, objective knowledge. Now, of course, that is good. But whatever we download in our brain and then we process with our mind is knowledge. Now, even if I have a walk in a forest and my brain is downloading data, that in that case are perceptual data, so the beauty of the forest, the temperature, the light, the flowers, and whatever is there. That is not something we usually consider as knowledge, but it is knowledge from a cognitive viewpoint. Is knowledge. I mean, knowledge doesn't exist without a human cognition there downloading that knowledge. Doesn't matter if that knowledge, I mean, for example, the knowledge about bacteria or molecular biology, which is good.
So you say, sorry, can I just get this clear? Because I feel a bit confused about knowledge. I thought knowledge was something that was information that had been processed, which was more like data rather than just raw information, just something that you just observe. I thought knowledge was something that had been processed, that you would consider data that had been filtered.
Yeah, I agree with that, but that's the point. Is it processed? or what is there is just a simulation. And I will say, in most cases, for most human beings, it's fundamentally a simulation. It's not processing something. It's about learning something and then repeating or discharging.
Yes, I wouldn't call that knowledge. I would call knowledge, I would define knowledge differently, as in the information has been collated, it has been sorted, it has been filtered, it has been processed, it has been thought about, and then there is, it's not the raw information, it's the data. That is what I would say the knowledge, because you need to apply something to that information to make it knowledge. I don't think that just looking at something to me is knowledge. That's information. That's how I would look at it.
Yeah, I agree with that too. But the information, whatever has to do with information, is knowledge, or in the sense it can become knowledge, or can be discharged, or forgot. But information, knowledge doesn't exist without assimilating information. We have to assimilate information.
Yeah. So sorry, but So in terms of the reptilians, I think that isn't knowledge. That's assimilating information, because nobody's seen a reptilian. It's just a belief system. It's just they've not even observed it. It's just something that has been fabricated.
I've seen many reptiles in my life. Sorry.
But that's why I have a problem with that being called knowledge. But maybe it is because so many people believe it. I don't know.
Okay, let's make it a little bit more complex, but also paradoxically enough, also in a form aimed at simplifying things, making it more clear. Now, what a computer does, not a computer, let's say a server, the computer machine that produces algorithms and assimilates data online. The computer so far has not a mind. That computer machine, or what they call it, deep machine learning network, is not sanctioned. So what it does is assimilating data and building knowledge, and then the purpose is to, depends of what the goal is all about, is to filter all of that knowledge to achieve a specific goal that can be marketing, or can be a business, or can be a computation. And that is how deep machine learning fundamentally works. But it has to assimilate constantly an enormous amount of data, building knowledge, and then trying to perform the best in the best way, whatever the task of that machine is all about. Filtering that knowledge, discharging the bad knowledge, discharging the irrelevant data, identify all of that as irrelevant, of course. And that is the information processing that the computer machine performs. Now, we do the same in our human way and psychological way. The problem is we don't really process accurately, usually, and generically speaking. What we do is assimilation. So we assimilate an enormous amount of knowledge via assimilating information. All the way since we were born, and then all the process of learning the language, schooling, and all of the stuff, education. And also the personal experiences, that is knowledge too. It doesn't match, I know, what will be the Cambridge meaning of the official meaning of knowledge in the Cambridge dictionary or something. I know it doesn't match that, but I'm decoding the meaning and the objective reality of knowledge in a more expanded picture. not just a dictionary. So whatever we do in terms of human experience is knowledge. Even our dreams, if we remember them, is information. So, long story short, whatever is assimilated, downloaded information that also becomes memory, the mnemonic field in our brain, is knowledge. Doesn't necessarily mean is linguistic knowledge or scientific knowledge or experienced knowledge or whatever. All of that too. But in itself, everything that as information that goes straight into our brain and gets accepted somehow or stored, not necessarily accepted, stored, and then becomes memory, that is knowledge. And it's called the human knowledge. That a lot of that knowledge is good. So the knowledge about how to speak, how to read, how to operate, particularly technically, how to eat and what to eat and what not to eat and all of that stuff is knowledge. And some of it is good and also crucial to survive and to live, in particular in our society. And some of that knowledge is biological, is based on instincts, and a lot of that knowledge is rubbish. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that what is the relationship we have with knowledge as we are describing in it, in terms of assimilating information? What is the relationship most people have with knowledge? That relationship is pretty bad. Who can dispute that? Who can dispute that? If you take some villagers in India living in the countryside, very religious, Hindu, their knowledge is all about what? Going to the temple every day, polishing some statue, making some noise with a bell.
Offering some kind of...
With all this the ritualistic, blind, automatic activity, putting the third eye on the forehead. They don't even know what that means, probably. That is supposed to mean wisdom. And that the concept of wisdom is all about repeating the same, say all the way through the centuries. And where are you now? If you ask them, where are you now? All the generation after another, we have been doing exactly the same. Going to the temple, worshipping some holy mountain or tree, all the stuff, 300,000 gods. And where are you now? You're nowhere. You're a robot. But that is knowledge. So, and then it would be nice to ask them, what is the relation? If you comprehend that this is knowledge, what we have been told, that maybe the books, the icons, the parents of the parents of the parents, and all of your human experience of your activities, that all of that is data. I know it sounds sterile to say this. It doesn't evoke any kind of divine, transcendental meaning whatsoever. But it's true. It's all about the brain and what you keep in there. Who can dispute that? So now it would be nice to ask these people, trying to make them think about that. What is not your relationship with your God, with your deity, with your afterlife, your karma, all of that, but to your very relationship with that knowledge. Is that what is that relation? What is the state of that relationship? That usually very mechanical. Is it healthy?
Yeah.
Don't you see how sad it is? Like, for example, people, as another form of knowledge, they cling to miracles. And they go on over and over. Don't you see how sad it is that? Stuck in a trap. That is fundamentally that happens because they are performing the measured top one mistake, that is clinging to knowledge, instead, in the first place, of not clinging, but calming down and reasoning about the relationship they have with that process of clinging to knowledge. That should be top one priority.
Yeah, and also part of clinging to knowledge is having hope. So hoping for things to happen. So kind of creates some kind of limbo or inertia, because if you're hoping for something to happen, you don't actually act on trying to get it because you believe it will just be given to you. So again, that's how knowledge is harmful in that way, because of the meaning of hope.
Well, knowledge in itself, data is not harmful. It's just data. It's there. Knowledge is like let me use this metaphor. Knowledge is like an ecosystem, like a jungle. So there is a lot of nice stuff in a jungle, and there is a lot of not evil stuff, but dangerous stuff. There's fundamentally is about life nourishing death, and death nourishing life, and that is the ecosystem. That, let's use this as a metaphor. That is knowledge. Well, if we just jump into the jungle because eventually we are attracted to the beauty or whatever, well, that would be a problem, because we are going to assimilate only what we think is nice, and we are going to be blind about what we don't even think actually that is or could be a serious problem or a life danger in many ways. Now, knowledge is like that jungle in itself. Is not bad or good. It's just there, and is the result of many years and thousands of years of evolution of that knowledge. The way we incorporate it is where the problems are, particularly when, in the first place, we cling to assimilation of knowledge or appeal to knowledge, and we don't instead select the preserving or developing a good reasoning process about what we are doing with that. That should be the priority, and that should be a super important matter of study in education.
Yeah, can I just clarify something? So, taking the reptilians again as the example, obviously I have knowledge about this crazy belief system, which I once believed in, and obviously so do lots of other people. So the knowledge about the reptilians itself isn't dangerous. It's whether you invest, it's the relationship you're having with it, and the kind of, and how you apply that with your thinking. So I've got the knowledge of the reptilians, but I don't, I've discharged it. I still obviously remember it. If someone says reptilians, I know what they're talking about, but it's discharged in my brain as in, I know it's nonsense, it's rubbish. But if someone else has the same knowledge, it could be harmful, but it's the way they apply it. It's not the knowledge itself. Is that what you mean?
Exactly.
Yes. Isn't harmful.
Yes, because there is another problem that I didn't mention, that usually we cling to knowledge in a monological form, and therefore in an inductive form, such as believing or not believing, taking for granted or rebelling, or assimilating or forgetting. That is monological and is bad. If we instead, if we were more educated, which we are not, to privilege a multilogical form of thinking, or what is known multidimensional form of thinking, or a multidirectional form of thinking is the same, we will be way more refreshingly prone to comprehend what kind of cognitive relationship we are establishing with certain knowledge. Now, as an example, back to the reptilians, why people came up, particularly actually one person, which is David Icke, came up with this idea of these invisible aliens, interdimensional aliens that look like reptiles. Well, according to David Icke, the history behind that, and this is a big part of his theory, is that the reptiles have been pretty much all over the non-human history as we know it, pretty much everywhere, almost in every culture. It's called a universal cultural element, also cultures that never came to know each other. They never got in touch, and he found this information via reading history or something, and then he translated that with his own interpretation, taking that as evidence of this presence of some invisible, interdimensional, intelligent aliens that look like reptiles. Now, if we approach this information and this knowledge, that is also history, multilogically, first of all, it will be way more refreshing to perform a sense making there. So the reason why it is true that the snake particularly is pretty much in almost every culture, ancient cultures that never met each other. We can find the snake icon in the Maya, the Aztec, the Indians in the North America, then in Europe, the cult.
Yeah, but they would have seen snakes.
Huh?
They would have seen snakes. I think dragons are more impressive because they are in every culture, but they're not a real living creature. You know, you can't find a dragon in the countryside or in the grass. You can find a snake. So I don't find that as impressive, but I do think the dragon is interesting as a symbol.
But the dragon is an evolution of the meaning of the snake, performed by the human imagination and then collectively. Dragons are pretty common. They are common in South America. They are obviously common in China. They've been there for thousands of years. In Bali, the dragon is called the barong, is actually the good guy, and so it is in China. And in the Europe is sort of the evil guy, is the evil figure, and so on. So why the dragon?
Yeah, the dragon is really. I find it impressive that the dragon is so everywhere.
So reptiles are also everywhere, and particular snakes are everywhere in the world. Every culture came to know snakes, and the way a snake behaves is
because it's an enemy, right? It's a predator.
It is a predator. It can be poisonous, but it moves very fast in a way that is very unfamiliar to the human brain in terms of information processing, because it's fast is not as a tiger will do or so on. It's sneaky. Yeah. It's sneaky. That's why sneaky comes from snake. Etymologically.
Because I've seen a snake move like really fast, and I've never seen anything like it. Like I remember that, it was quite a few years ago, but I don't think I'll ever forget it. Once you see a snake really move really fast, it's the most incredible thing. It's so frightening. It is so frightening. They're so fast.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, and then of course the human imagination developed archetypes like that. They became giant snakes or flying snakes. I mean, the archetype of a dragon is fundamentally a flying snake. It's super terrible, frightening. So we worked a lot with our imagination, and then became the snake, the reptile. That kind of reptile became a human, powerful human archetype, and that's why it's pretty much everywhere. But doesn't mean there is some interdimensional agent or reality there. It's just the frightening reality of the way we compute snakes, because they have to do with the invisibility. They know they are there, but we don't see them. You enter the jungle, they can be mimetic. They can look like a tree, but they are there. So all those profound primal human fears related to the snake, the existence of snakes, became archetypal, and through thousands of years, of course, they became a strong part of the culture, twisted by the human imagination, the spoken word, and then the collective accepted beliefs. And that is the most reasonable explanation.
Yes.
So why the reptilians are invisible? Well, because the snakes are also pretty much invisible. You know they are there, but it's quite hard to see them. I mean, well, I lived in Bali for years, and I had the green mambas every single night in my garden because there were frogs, and I had a good relationship with them, was not disturbing them, and vice versa. That was an ecosystem, but there are pythons in Bali. I came across a python only twice, and one was a baby, and the other one was kind of an adult, swimming in a small river in the night. And despite they are everywhere, you don't see them, but they are there. So this archetypal concept of invisibility is way more frightening than the actual visibility, and that's why the reptilian aliens are not visible. That is an archetype, also a mystical archetype of the devil is there, but you don't see it. The most common statement about the devil is the best way the devil has to deceive you is to make you believe it doesn't exist. How cool is that? Of course it doesn't, but your imagination does, and you assimilate that data, but you don't process that properly.
And also, I think the way that the snake is so adaptable, it's been around for billions of years, it's been around since the time of the dinosaurs, and it's still here, and it can, go so fast across land. It can climb up trees, it can hang down from branches, it can swim in the water. I mean, there's nothing it can't do. And it swallows its prey whole, and it's just frightening. It's got fangs, and it is like the most frightening looking creature that seems to be almost, as you say, indestructible in some ways, just everywhere, can do anything and just pop out at any time.
Yeah.
Although I think snakes are wonderful.
Oh, I completely agree with that. But another element is that, for example, why the snake is usually more frightening than a tiger. A tiger is way more frightening than a snake, because there are many snakes. They are actually pretty shy, and they don't want to hurt you because they don't want to take that risk. They can be killed. I had, I repeat, I had the green mambas in my garden in Bali every night, and they were trying to find food, but they were frightened of humans. And I had an experience with a family of cobras. They entered the house by mistake. They were 3. They have a strong sense of family. They were striving to get out of the house, the garden, and they were frightened. They were not willing to attack or something. They just wanted to move on. And they are creatures, but we tend to detect some kind of emotion in a tiger because it resembles a cat, and it does have emotions, of course. But the snake looks like emotionless. Doesn't show any kind of emotion. We don't see emotions in the configuration of the physiognomy and the morphology of the face of a crocodile. And therefore, for a very long time, we believed that reptiles, particular reptiles, have no emotions whatsoever, and they are also cold-blooded. So they must be sent by the devil himself. So the human interpretations, fundamentally. But that you see, that I'm using all of this as an example, that knowing there are snakes and how they behave, and they can be dangerous, is knowledge. But if we appeal to that knowledge, we cling to it, and that's it in the first place, and only that, that means being blind and dull, because there are many elements we are going to to compute and avoid. So our information processing with that knowledge is absolutely bad. And then we are going to use our imagination to apply further meanings that are false. So they are evil and is the devil sending them, or crazy stuff like that. If instead we do not appeal to knowledge in the first place, but we rather care about how we are processing that data. I know there are snakes there, and I'm going to live there. How am I processing this? That should be the first approach. So I completely avoid any kind of infection and infestation in my mind caused by beliefs, former beliefs, ideas, interpretations, opinions, and rubbish, crazy stuff. So at least I will have a refreshing approach. And then I don't know what to do, but I will have a way better understanding of what I should do. So I should be careful. I should not go into the jungle in the night blindly, because that probably will be summoning problems. I have to understand their behaviors, what they do, what they eat, what is poison, what snake is poison, what is not. And that's it. And then eventually I can just like that be contemplating their beauty, because they are beautiful. Some snakes are stunning. The coral snake is a piece of art.
Yes.
It's deadly, but it's a piece of art. And it's so...
The thing, about nature is, a lot of nature is actually very deadly and can cause us a lot of harm, but at the same time is very beautiful and has a lot of beauty in it, such as a jungle or a hurricane or a thunderstorm, or there's a lot of beauty in that sort of I don't know, like the day. I think people may interpret, I don't like it when people talk about Mother Nature now. I find that really dull. It's really dumb, because if they really looked at nature properly and observed it, they would see that nature is actually quite brutal and is really quite savage, and is not Mother Nature. Is actually like a brute, like a beast. And I was trying to write a poem for children about the fact that nature is like actually quite I don't want to say dangerous, but like it's not Mother Nature. It's more like a beast. But it's beautiful at the same time. It's like this beautiful force and power, and this kind of, instead of this romanticized view of nature, because it is beautiful, but then people romanticize about it and call it Mother Nature, and it's like it's not mother, like a mother. It's not embracing, it's not kind, it's not caring. It doesn't care about you. It will kill you if you get caught in, a thunderstorm or a lightning storm. You get killed and you get drowned, or go into a jungle, you can get eaten alive.
Well, I would suggest those people who worship this Mother Nature nonsense, and particularly interpret this in this human form of mother, the female nature. Well, that is not really. I mean, what I will propose them. What will you think about this virus? This virus is a part of Mother Nature. So is it good? It's a virus trying to survive, and just like many other viruses in the past, it managed to escape some animal in some jungle. It became a human virus, and the only difference is that it spread using human things, such as planes, while in the past viruses like that used to move around on foot. And that's it. That's Mother Nature. It's not China to be blamed or something. It has been like that forever. The other difference is that this time we were not able to contain it like we did with SARS #1, the outbreak in 2002 in Singapore. That actually was apparently even worse than this virus. That is Mother Nature. So how you come to terms with that? Is this lovely and so on? So Mother Nature is not lovely or evil.
Yeah.
It's just biological. And everything is biological, tries to survive, replicate, and does it. And eventually killing other people. And that's it. We are also a virus. And I know it's very rhetorical to say that, but it's true. We actually function as a virus. Graphically, objectively, in reality. And the top one virus, or the viruses of the viruses, is not even biological. It is memetic, and therefore psychological, and that is stupidity. That is not even part of Mother Nature.
I don't that go down very well if you were to publicly say that we act like a virus, or we are a virus.
We are so, and we are not even. We are a part of so-called Mother Nature, of course, but the way we think that what I call memetic evolution, that has many good parts and many super nasty and super dangerous parts, is not even natural. It's entirely based on meanings constructed by humans and interpreted in a very bad way, and that is the result. Meanings do not exist in nature. Without humans, there are no meanings. There are instincts among other animals based on how natural selection developed genes, and therefore the formation of instinctual memories. So, for example, nearly any animal detects a fire as a danger, but doesn't mean that the animal has a meaning. Meanings are not required. It's just a danger because instinctually, even if the fire is far away, they don't feel the temperature yet, they identify that as a danger, and they identify a pool of water as something good, but without using meanings. Now, I'm not saying we should not use meanings. We had a memetic evolution, our brain is way more advanced, and that is good, absolutely good. What is not good is the way we interface ourselves with that knowledge that also involves meanings. And that is a tremendously terrible and even shocking lack we never quite care about, and we should in educational terms, because the way we cared about so far and in the past about that problem was not the rational, intelligent way, but was about adding further meanings to the pre-existing meanings, or demolishing pre-existing meanings to substitute them with new meanings, or ergo, new beliefs. So we invented all the religions, the ideologies, the spirituality nonsense, all of the stuff. And again, where are we now? Struggling with taking positions. That is bad, that is good, and the left and the right, that is super monological, and it is a form of like a personal and collective hypnosis.
Because we shouldn't be struggling so much, really, should we? I mean, to think of all the progress that we've made over the past 50 years, how we used to live and how we live now, we've never had it so good. We've never been so well off and had so many nice things and been so well connected and having the opportunities that we've got. So why are we still struggling so much? And it seems to be getting worse. Our struggle, we don't have the physical struggle anymore. We don't have the technical struggle like we used to in the past, when we didn't have, computers and we didn't have the internet, and people really were struggling to survive and to make money and to put food on the table. We don't have that struggle. 90% of people in the Western world do not have that struggle anymore. It's not really an issue anymore, but we are struggling psychologically in ways, that catastrophic ways, that we never used to struggle with before in the past, when we had the physical struggle.
Yeah.
It's getting worse. It's becoming more acute. I think we're actually becoming much more aware of it, which is good, but at the same time it's now escalating. It's like exponential growth in this struggle, constant struggle, and we shouldn't be struggling this guy I was listening to last night was like, struggling is a part of life. And I'm thinking, no, it's not. It shouldn't be, not in the Western world. You know, we have dealt with struggle in terms of physical struggle, and people shouldn't be struggling physically, and neither should we be struggling mentally or psychologically, but we are. Now that's a problem. That to me shows that there is still a problem. If there's struggle, that's something we need to forensically look at. It's telling us to look at it, not because we just accept it, we just have to struggle. No, I don't accept that.